comments that I'd like to make. I said, as I look back at this process, I wrote down here some notes to myself. Said, development of the 24-25 budget and 4-year outlook required a duration of 104 workdays, started in April the 3rd and ended in August the 20th. Hundreds of staff labor hours, 13 iterations of personnel budgeting, including lengthy meetings regarding difficult decisions on reductions in force and subsequent restorations, 10 iterations of MSOC budgeting, consultations with 2 separate ESDs, 189 and 112, and 2 full and complete reviews of the documents that you have before you tonight. I would like to thank all staff who work diligently to participate in meetings, provide input, and do the often difficult work on putting together a budget within the current climate of public school finance. I share this background not for personal or professional accolades, but to provide the board of directors, its citizens, and staff assurances of a great deal of time, thought, and oversight went into the documents you'll be approving this evening. The budget is defined as authority to expend. Based on this guidance, we have attempted to address known information/needs and make reasonable allowances for those things which at this time are uncertain but may occur. While no one can see the future, the F-195 budget and the F-195F, the 4-year outlook, being presented to you today represents our best efforts towards this end. All right, with that being said, this is essentially a revised version of the one that I brought to you a month ago, approximately a month ago. So it is a little bit shorter, so I'll kind of walk you through that. And then we can dive into the documents themselves and, like Dan said, point out a couple of things and answer questions. So Kayla, next slide, please. So again, just reiterating the objectives and how we put together the budget, providing adequate resources to address student educational and social emotional needs, address growth-related challenges, specifically at this school, obtain bargaining agreements for open employment contracts, and end the upcoming 24-25 fiscal year with an estimated fund balance of at least $1 million. Continue. And then again, just restating our enrollment, these have not changed from before. All signs look that these, we will do better than this. We have positive signs as far as that, but these are the numbers that are in the budget, which have driven the corresponding revenue numbers. Next slide, please. So this here is a summary. The first page, this one here really is kind of the quick snapshot. This is what's called Budget and Excess Levy Summary page. And this is essentially the first page of the 41-page report that I give to you. And this is the high level summarized. Everything else after that is dives into much more detail. So you look at total revenues and other financing sources for general fund, $41,850,624. Total appropriations or expenditures, $41,901,506. Other financing uses, which are transfers out. This is for non-voted debt, which is called our LGO1, which was brought out initially for the initial repair of the middle school roof. It is $97,480 per year. That's broken into 2 installments, but a total of that. So if you take the revenues less the expenditures and the transfers out, it gives you an anticipated result from operations for this upcoming year of negative $148,361. The total beginning fund balance, which is the same as your ending for this year, would become your beginning September 1, $1.335 million, less the $148,000 gives you an estimated ending total fund balance August 31 of 2025 of $1,186,638. So this budget does meet the requirement of the board set of at least a $1 million anticipated ending fund balance for the upcoming fiscal year.
Without having to do math, what percentage is that? Do you know?
What percentage of?
So
As far as the fund balance percentage?
2.5. 2.5 to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, for next year, about 3. For ASB, Associated Student Body, $299,378 in anticipated revenues, $369,574 in expenditures, which would yield an operating loss of $70,196. We're anticipating that they will begin with approximately $200,000. They'll have a loss of $70,000. We'll give them an ending estimated balance of just under $130,000, $129,804. Our debt service fund is essentially just a clearing account of which monies go in, monies go out 2 times a year for indebtedness payments. So revenues will be $803,630. The expenditures will be the same exact amount, $803,630. They will start with 127,750, and they will end with 127,750. So everything that goes in comes directly out. We transfer monies in, monies are taken for payments twice a year. Capital Projects Fund, anticipated revenues $5,087,231. Expenditures just under $4 million at $3,911,000. Transfers out are significant because again, you have indebtedness that some of your non-voted debt is starting to really kick in here this next year. $979,026 gives you an operating gain of $197,205. We'll start at $1.5 million, you'll end at just under $1.7, $1,697,205. Transportation Vehicle Fund, revenues, $4,752,500. I'll speak to this in the thing. You'll say, why are the revenues so high in Transportation Vehicle Fund? Because there is a possibility of a grant for electrified buses, okay? Whether we were a recipient of that or whether we would choose to formally throw our hat in the ring for that still remains to be decided. However, the capacity for that is there. Again, a budget is defined as an authority to expend. It doesn't mean you're required to expend it. You have the authority to expend up to that number. So it's just building in there. If those things should happen, we would have that forethought to exercise that, okay? So the revenues are in there, the expenditures at $4.55 million are built in there for the corresponding use for those buses and the corresponding outcome. Okay, continue on, Kayla, next slide. So general fund revenues, again, this is just stating, breaking it out. Federal, state, local, the $41,850,624. Those are the various sources, what we call sources for revenues. Next slide, please. Expenditures, again, staffing, which is your objects 2s, 3s, and 4s, just under $33,032,976,947. Material supplies and operating costs, which are objects 5, 7, 8, and 9, just under $9 million, $8,924,559. Your transfers out, again, which we talked about, that's for indebtedness that's due by the responsibility of general fund, $97,480 per year. And the total expenditures or appropriations, just under $42 million, $41,998,986. And it gives down there the percentages of the budget that each slice of that pie is. So salaries and staffing is 79.2%, material supplies and operating costs 20.6%, transfers 0.2% for a total of 100%. Next slide. This is part of the budget development and approval process. There's what is called the MSOC disclosure form. This is here. We'll actually have this. Dan, you will sign this as a document at the end of the meeting tonight, and it'll be submitted along with the budget documents themselves. But basically this says is that the district anticipates to expend $1.120 million more in material supplies and operating costs than it receives from the state. If the number was the other way, if the sign was positive, the district would have to submit a plan to demonstrate how they will expend those excess resources to benefit students. But we are in a deficit, so therefore a plan is not required. If you have a surplus, a plan is required. Okay. Next slide. Fund balance, minimum fund balance policy, GL 891, was rescinded. The board several months ago made a decision to rescind that for the 24-25 year from the 4% of prior year's expenditures to a fixed value of $1 million. And we talked about that. The budget that is being brought forth to you tonight more than meets that requirement. Goal is to restore the 4% requirement for 25-26 and beyond. Excuse me. Estimated total fund balance again is just under 1.2 million, 1,186,638, and the net change operating result for next year is anticipated to be just under about a negative $150,000, $148,360. Next. Okay, so capital projects. So switching to Fund 20 capital projects. No, it says continued. Sorry, there was another slide I took away. Estimated revenues, again, just over $5 million. The estimated expenditures. The yellow highlight indicates that's a change from the prior version that I brought to you. Remember, we talked about these back in July. There was some expenditures for ongoing. What we had looked at was new expenditures for new projects, but I had omitted the ongoing expenditures for technology and things like that. That had been missed in the first round. So that number, that 3.911, is larger than prior and is encompassing of not only new projects, but annual requirements for ongoing projects. Okay? And as such, that also will change the ending fund balance too. So those two items are highlighted in yellow. The others are unchanged from the prior version. Next slide. So CA student body, no changes here from prior, from the one that I brought you a month ago, just under 300,000, 370,000 expenditures, estimated loss just a little over $70,000. Put down your ongoing challenges regarding cost of officials and uniforms, primary factors that are the rising expenditures. More emphasis on fundraising is needed. They're going to need some additional revenue streams to continue to support their activities. Whether those revenue streams come from outside sources or whether they're the assumption is that they will come from outside sources in the 4-year outlook.
Can I jump in real quick on this one? That was one of the things that we talked about. So they have the money they have all the money they need for output. This is just going to lower their ending balance. So
Correct.
they're not $70,000 short that they
Things will
don't
be
have the
paid for.
money. They have the money, but it's just it's less than they're gonna bring in.
Correct.
So they
You go
still have
back
the money to pay for everything, but
Yeah,
they
back
still
on
need
the
to, yeah.
summary sheet, they will end at about $130,000 in the black.
I think
okay?
we weren't.
So this year, they're still covered.
Yeah.
Got
Yes. They are not in an overall deficit. They will lose money this next year, but they are not in an ending deficit.
Got
They
it.
will be a positive ending balance.
They need to
But as you can see, just like in your own
Sure.
personal finances, if your savings account drops and drops and drops, eventually there's gonna be a problem. Eventually there won't be any money for it to do that. That is not the situation for next year, okay?
I just wanted to clarify.
Yep. Next slide, Caleb, please. Transportation vehicle fund, we already kind of talked about this. There's a potential grant out there for $4.5 million for electrified buses. Therefore, I built capacity in there if we were to receive that award, and likewise, we would need to expend that money. So that's just in there as a, just in case. It's capacity. Okay? It's, again, you would have the authority to expend up to $4.55 million. Doesn't mean you have to spend it, it's just you have authority to spend up to that amount. Next slide. Okay, again, two highlighted things in yellow. Yellow is kind of the theme. Yellow highlight indicates changes from prior. Okay? So we went through this, the 4-year assumptions. I didn't change the student enrollment growth, kept it at 2%. Okay, 2% per year for year 2, 3, and 4. However, the second bullet point you can see is highlighted in yellow. Found that as I went through and looked at the first iteration of this, is that the intent is for in 25, 26, and beyond to represent that this building would no longer be eligible for high poverty lab. Well, the model, the way that it was set up, there was an error in the formula. It was assuming that all buildings district-wide stopped receiving HP lab in 25, 26, and beyond. So that was a pretty significant change. So I went back through now, and we are making the assumption that all schools, including this one, will remain eligible for HP lab funding for all projected years. So that drove quite a bit of additional revenue. Because you'll remember, when we talked about this a month ago, we had a fairly significant negative fund balance projection. But this drove significant amounts of additional revenue.
This one's a good example why I think there's only limited use in a 4-year expenditure model. We will know before we put out the next 4-year one if any of our buildings don't qualify. We will know before that happens. So when you're trying to, there's a reason why SCS, this current building right here, wouldn't be on it, but there's also some language that I've seen that gives reason to believe they will be. But if the state makes a change, we'll know before the next budget's put out.
What does HP LAP stand for?
High poverty lab.
Got it.
LAP is Learning Assistance Program. So there's
Okay.
two components, what we call regular LAP, Regular Learning Assistance Program, and there's what's called HP, or High Poverty Learning Assistance Program. They're both state resources, okay? But the High Poverty LAP is allocated on a per building level. So buildings either qualify or don't qualify, okay? LAP is always based on your prior year enrollment as well. So let's say you had 1,000 more kids next year. Your LAP amount is going to be based on the number of kids you had this past year. It doesn't matter. It's always 1 year in arrears, okay? But yes, I think
Thank you.
HP is high poverty. Okay. Inflation kept that at 3%. Again, inflation is cooling, but it's still in there at 3% in years 2, 3, and 4. Salaries, talk about them limiting them to IPD only in years 2, 3, and 4. assumes that the state model, the prototypical school funding model remains unchanged and that there's no external intervention. Now, as we get additional districts that are going into financial distress, binding conditions and so forth, obviously Marysville is very well known. Moses Lake is the next one that is stepping up. Yelm, there's like 6 districts statewide that are currently under binding conditions, so there might be a change, there might not, I don't know, but at this point, the assumption is no, it will not change. And then the last one is highlighted in yellow. This is a change. Previously, we had, I had not had a subsequent capital projects levy dovetailing into the expiration of the current one, but that has been changed, and it is now 25 cents, 25% the size of the current one. So once the current one expires, then we will have one essentially that's about 25% of that will continue for calendar year 2027 and beyond. Okay? And this is to fund just ongoing expenditures, technology-related expenditures and things that are in place that we're continuing. So that is a change from the prior. Those two things are changes from the prior one I brought you in July. Okay, next slide. Changes from draft 1 again that was presented on 7/22. Just kind of went and identified that the forecast was removing high poverty lap funding from all buildings beginning in 25-26. The intent was to remove only from here. This has been corrected. The assumption now is that all buildings will be eligible to receive high poverty lap for all years of the outlook. Identified that the forecast model assumed 36, not 54 students in TK programs. You remember, we had kind of a late decision to add a 3rd session of TK. We had 2. Okay, 2 at 18 would have been 36 kids. We added a 3rd, which would take us to 54. Well, the model in years 2, 3, and 4 still had it at 36, not 54. So when I changed it from 36 to 54 in years 2, 3, and 4, that drove additional revenue as well. So you had 2 major things that drove additional revenue. The biggest one was the high poverty lap, and the second one was the identification that we were underestimating the number of students in TK in years 2, 3, and 4. Okay? These 2 corrections allow the district to move from an initial estimated deficit of $2.2 million in 27-28 to now just over 12,000, actually I think it's 112,000, but 12,000 positive. We had a last second change. I think it's 112,000 positive.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, it is.
Big swing. That's why I wanted to be very clear. What, you know, because I can certainly say, what changed? Well, this is what changed. And these were pretty significant. Like as far as HP Lab, we get about $700,000 a year in HP Lab. So all of a sudden, if you take 3 years that you're not doing, that's $2.1 million right there. Okay? Then you've got your TK. You've got 3 years that you essentially got a third more revenue than you had thought initially, because you're changing from 36 students to 54 students, additional 18 students. It's another third. So those 2 things made a significant difference in the outlook. Now, does the outlook hit the 4% goal? No, it doesn't, but it's not in the red, so bad as it was before. So I think let's look at the glass half full versus half empty. So next page, basically it summarizes those. The 195F has all of these, but these are kind of the key figures, the key metrics. And yes, you're going to end at 112,000, not 12,000. I'm sorry, that was a typo on that slide. So it should be 112,571 in general fund. So you go from just a little over 1.2 million to year 2, 808,000 to year 3, 505,000 to year 4, 112,000. But you do stay in the black in all 4 years. We do not go into the red. Okay. It also does break out capital projects fund. It talks about the difference between impact fees and levy proceeds fund purposes. You can see to the right there, those entries in red. So it attempts to break those out because we have certain expenditures. Indebtedness is the biggest one. That some of the non-voted debt is eligible for repayment via impact fees. And so every semi-annually I go through and take the amount of the indebtedness that is attributable to impact fees, code that to impact fees. The rest is coded to fund purposes or levy proceeds. Debt service, looking at that again, debt service is just a clearing fund. It doesn't increase or decrease. It stays at 127,750. Inflows equal outflows. Associated student body is 129,804 in year 1, 105,442 in year 2, 78,848 in year 3, and right at about 50,000 in year 4. Now, note, under revenues, there's an asterisk there. It's kind of hard to see, but it ties to the legend. The legend says assumption ASB will need to raise $50,000 annually in years 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So that's what we're talking about, is that yes, they have a $70,000 shortfall this year. They can't indefinitely do that. They can't just draw down and draw down and draw down. They'll run out of money at some point. So we need to identify that, we need to look at ways in which they can change that trajectory of that revenue stream to increase it, so that, because we're gonna continue to have cost rises in officials, we're gonna continue to have cost rises in uniforms and other consumables and things like that that they need for their various activities. And the transportation vehicle fund, like I said, you have that large potential distortion in year one, that $4 million grant award and so forth, but ending at $457,000 in year one, $10,000 in year two, $12,500 in year three, and $15,000 in year four. The intent with transportation vehicle fund is each year essentially you spend what you take in. You receive your allocation for transportation once per year. It's in the month of August. You get your annual depreciation allocation, and then typically you would take delivery of a bus or two buses and essentially spend that. So the intent usually is you don't hold a lot of money in that account. Money comes in, you purchase new equipment, you expend that money, and that's why you can see fairly modest balances in year 2, 3, and 4 at $10,000, $12,500, and $15,000 respectively. Next question, or next slide. Okay, system, I mentioned this before, I like to use this phrase, system problem, not just a Sultan problem, you know. Currently, like I mentioned, currently 6 districts in the state that are what they call binding conditions. SAO, the State Auditor's Office, recently published what they call FIT, F-I-T, which stands for Fiscal Intelligence Tool. And the Fiscal Intelligence Tool goes through all public entities in which the State Auditor's Office audits. So everything from fire districts to hospitals to public schools to governmental, municipal agencies and so on and so forth. And this is relatively new, but I thought it was interesting in that in the state of Washington we have 295 school districts. Based on the FIT tool, FIT tool, FIT, that SAO has put out, 68 districts, which is about 23%, received an overall good grade. Okay, their financial health was deemed good overall. There are 7 criteria, okay, that they go, and they were able to, 68 districts of the 295 got a good overall score. 45 districts got what's called a cautionary or a mid-grade score in the yellow. That's about 15%. And then almost 62%, or 182 of the 295 districts, got a concerning score, okay? We were one of those 182 districts that overall got a concerning score, okay? The concerning score was based on 3 criteria. You have, of the 7, so we had 2 that were marked as good. You can see there's that where I say 2, 3, 2 there. 2 were in green, so we got 2 marks that were good. We got 3 marks that were cautionary, and we got 2 marks that were concerning. The problem is the 2 that were concerning have a heavier weight than the other ones. You might say, well, why didn't you get a yellow? Because you got just as many on the bottom end as the top end. Basic math would tell you you should have got a yellow, should have got a cautionary. The problem is the 2 concernings are weighted more heavily than some of the others. Therefore, overall, the metric put us down in with 62% of the other districts in the state. Okay.
And you should note that those 2 concerning were both the same thing, fund balance.
Fund balance sufficiency, I think was the 2. Basically saying, in their estimation, is there sufficient resources to be an ongoing entity, is what they're saying. And they're feeling they had concern in that
Their
area.
threshold for that, the auditor's threshold is 60 days of cash on hand. For us, that's between $5 and $6 million. We've
very
never
high
had a fund balance of $5 or $6 million, ever.
Most of the districts that got in the good grade were very small, rural, predominantly eastern Washington districts that received that overall grade, that 68 districts. By and large, they were, not all, but most. So I mentioned this before, I says, while our four-year outlook is greatly improved, none of the years presented meet the board's goal of reinstating the 4% minimum fund balance policy, okay? We're not near as dire as it was, but it's not as good as you would like it to be. A combination of revenue enhancement, cost containment will be necessary to meet this goal in subsequent years. If that truly is the goal of the board to get there, we will have work to do. We'll either need to look at additional revenue streams, need to look at containing costs, and obviously if we get tons and tons of kids, that certainly helps. that helps. That buoys up your revenue stream. But don't be fooled. Additional students, there are challenges and opportunities with new students coming. Yes, there's additional revenue that is attached to those students, but they don't always fall neatly in places that you just happen to have space. It means many times hiring additional staff, contracting with outside providers for services these students need that you can't provide. Space, outfitting new classrooms, curriculum. So there are costs that come along with growth as well too. Summary, last page. Again, I mentioned this before, fund balance has dropped about 3/4, 73.5%, since the high water mark, which was, pre-COVID, back to the McCleary year. You might have heard that term before. It's related to a court ruling. Some of the factors that cause that, the elevated IPD, or the implicit price deflator, has negatively affected fund balance for all districts. Because again, although not all are funded, there is an expectation that all will receive. Okay? So, it's published out there, IPD is 3.7%. I can understand why everyone would feel, well, I should get 3.7%, but we aren't funded for every person 100%. So, annual review and realignment of staff who are necessary to get back to the 4% minimum fund balance policy, MFBP. Inflation will continue to put pressure on MSOC budgets. Elementary growth will be soon be moving up middle school, high school. Obviously, we're seeing it here now, but those kids are getting older, and they're gonna push their way up through the system. Aging facilities continue to be costly to repair and maintain. And growth, like I mentioned before, presents opportunities and challenges, okay? It's great, it's a great problem to have. Trust me, we're in a good place. A lot of districts are looking at declining enrollment, and that's a whole other set of challenges. And they're having to make drastic cuts to their budgets to make them approvable. That isn't our situation, so that's good. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't come without its challenges as well too. So, all right, that's the overall 10,000-foot summary. I wanted to mention one thing that Dan talked about in the documents themselves. We have been, as I mentioned before, we made a software change in February of this year from Skyward to a product called Cumulative. Cumulative is essentially the new Skyward. So it's essentially the updated version. It's not a new package or a different company. It's the same company, same supplier, but it's the updated version. The transition has been a challenge, more so than I had hoped. More so than we were kind of led to believe, but anyway, we've survived. We're 5+ months into it now. But one of the hiccups that is a known issue with their program is that it is overstated the FTE, or the full-time equivalency, of the number of staff that you have. In the budget, I believe it shows that our classified staff is like 173 or 178 or something like that. That is not correct. Our number of classified staff is closer to 100, okay? The problem is, and I won't bore you with all the details, but you have what's called a base assignment. So if somebody works a full schedule, they're a 1.0 full-time equivalency. Well, many staff also have supplemental assignments that they do. Maybe they're an advisor, maybe they're doing additional work, and so on and so forth. What's happening in the software is those additional assignments are also generating duplicate FTE. So that one person is being counted and replicated. So it's increasing that overall total artificially. The ESD is aware of this. We will make those corrections, but we are not overstating. We are not paying 178 people, okay? The number of FTE is overstated, but the costs are not overstated.
The revenue that's generating is not overstating the
Yeah.
revenue either.
The revenues and expenditures are accurate, it's just the represented FTE of the number of staff. Like I said, we have the two reviews, the ESD, one of the ones that Lori, who's my fiscal officer at ESD 189, said, she goes, did you guys really add that many people? And it's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, or she goes, or is this a software issue? I said, no, that's not correct. And she said, it was a known issue. She saw several other districts who were on the cumulative package had similar things. So it's, I don't want to use the word bug, but it's a workaround that's in the system that we're still trying to get taken care
And I
of.
think it says 156 for certified, the closer number is 142, and that includes administrators.
Includes
So it's
administrators, yeah.
down about 3 from last year, and that would align to what we didn't fill, closer to that.
So that is a misstatement that's in there. But the revenues expenditures are correct. It's just that value is misstated currently. So I'm transparent about that.
Dan, do you have anything to add to?
Yeah, I think the thing I would add, when you think of, okay, well, if we budgeted off this amount, where are we today? There's a lot of activity going on. Right now, we have 2,092 kids enrolled today, and we budgeted for 1,998, okay? That's gonna go up and down. Where it settles, I don't know, but I would say that I think it'll be safe that we will be probably 50 kids over budget. And how that's spread out, like this school here, they've got 683 kids enrolled, which is, I think we ended the year at 636. You know, and we even moved the preschool, 2 of them up to Gold Bar. So there's a lot of kids. And, you know, how it settles, we don't know. Sultan Middle School, 461 or 462, and I think we budgeted for flat enrollment. Ended at 436. So how that all shakes out and what the class sizes look like, you just don't know. But we will, you'll likely, if the patterns follow, we will lose some kids before the first day of school because they're still in our enrollment, but they have moved and we haven't received the records request yet. That's why, you know, it's about 92 or 94 over budget. That's why I said, well, even if it falls off drastically, it's likely to be 40 to 50 over, at, you know, being conservative, which is good. Because
That is good, yeah.
that would help the board meet your fund balance goal pretty easily, I think, provided all that. The other thing I would say is that our expenditures have dropped off the last few months, and that's why you keep seeing the fund balance increase. You know, when we, and I shared some narrative of that. I think we ended July with 1.335. August isn't over, but it's, if the patterns continue, it's likely to increase a little more. So,
Yeah, I'll go into more detail during the regular meeting as far as that, but
Yeah.
that's.
Mike, any questions?
No, great to hear the enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a challenge, but
yeah.
Wish we'd have had those last year. Michael,
Nope, no questions.
Isaac,
No.
Marianne?
I just wanted to thank you for clarifying that classified staff count from the 23-24 number to the 24-25 number,
Yeah.
and how off it was, and even though the certificated was only a few numbers, thank you,
Yeah, no problem.
and explaining that.
Yeah, it's.
Becky has
it's-
put in hours trying to figure this out.
Yeah, we have spent a fair amount of time already working on this. Like I said, but when the ESD did the initial review, the ESD does 2 reviews. Lori does, and Lori is very, very detailed. Does an initial full review, she sends me a whole list of questions, I respond to her, and she then says, yes, I'm satisfied with your answers, or I'm not satisfied with your answers. But the biggest one was, the first one was that, and she said, is this true, or is this a software issue? And it's like, no, it's gotta be a software issue. And then that she shared with me, yes, this is not just to us, but.
All right,
several
I
other
think that everybody is good, right?
So there'll be a resolution that'll be part of the regular business meeting that you will approve. Essentially, you're approving the appropriations, the expenditure, because the budget is, again, authority to expend. So you'll be going through that, and then there will also be, Dan, you will sign the MSOC disclosure form as well, which is part of
We've
the.
been doing that for the last few years.
Yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years now, that requirement. It has to be part of the budget development process and also a final signed document. So I gave it to you last month, and then it's also included in this month as well. And
Awesome.
then, once that's done, Dan will sign and electronically certify the budget this week and get it sent off to OSBI by Friday.
Okay, thank you. Can I get, if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are starting
Thank
in
you,
at
Dan.
6 o'clock.
Thank you, Dan.
appreciate it.
You bet.